Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to Early Childhood Mathematics, Developing Foundational Skills. We're ready to get started with Session 2. In this session, we'll be looking at blocks and block play, and the importance of blocks and block play in developing mathematical proficiency for our young learners. What skills are learners developing in the image you see here? You might be thinking spatial awareness, understanding of prepositions, collaborative play, compromise, representational play, pretend play. And you'd be right on all of those. Let's dive a little deeper. For our learning outcomes today, you will be able to list at least the first stages of block play, provide 3 adaptations for block play for learners with physical disabilities, and discuss 3 strategies that families, caregivers, and educators can use to foster block play to develop mathematical skills. Block play is critical in the early years in helping children understand many important concepts in geometry, number, and measurement. This is an Instagram picture from quite a few years ago of a friend of mine's daughter. And when I saw it and I saw her put on the caption Future Urban Planner, I was like, you are so spot on. It is exactly that play with blocks that helps our learners develop skills that they need for future mathematical understanding. When we examine some of the research that's out there on block play, we see that it goes way beyond simply stacking and dump and fill, and that there's actually 6, and some will say more, stages to block play that include carry and tote, building, bridging, enclosures, representational building, units of units or complex structures. Let's take a little bit more look in detail. The first stage of block play is called carry and tote. And while this often starts to develop around age 1, it can actually last and children can engage in this type of carry and tote play up through age 3 and beyond. In carry and tote, children will carry, move, touch, hold, drop, and feel blocks, even mouthing them as this little one is in the image, generally exploring their properties. They explore a variety of containers in which to pack, repack, and haul blocks. And in the carry and tote stage, that dumping is as important as the filling and can really take up a great deal of playtime for our young learners with lots of opportunities for language, such as in and out and uh-oh. Learners are exploring concepts of volume, attributes such as shape and size in the context of exploring each block independently. In the building or stacking stage, which usually starts around 2, but interest in this persists for much longer, in this stage, children line up blocks horizontally and stack blocks vertically. They use simple 2-dimensional patterns, gradually moving to more complex patterns, some of them 3-dimensional. But in this stage, the knocking down the block is as important as the stacking them up. And there's as much enjoyment and learning that comes from that. How tall can we get our tower to be? How strong is our tower? How stable and steady is it? They are learning about attributes of size and shape and how this impacts their ability to stack their blocks successfully. The third stage of block play is called bridging, and this typically develops at around ages 3 to 4. During bridging, children form a space between 2 blocks and then span the space with a 3rd block. Eventually, children in this stage build stacks and rows, adding bridges and creating passageways. In this manner, learners expand their understanding of prepositions, of spatial awareness, and of physics. Stage 4 of block play is enclosures, and typically children begin to go through this stage of block play at around age 4 or 5. During this time, children close up spaces between blocks with other blocks. They begin to plan ahead about how to close up a space and solve problems to reach their goals. After enclosing a space with blocks flat on the floor, children begin constructing stacked enclosures. They include passageways and have ideas about where they want to go with their blocks. They may add storylines incorporating miniature animals, people, signs. This leads us into the 5th stage, or representational building. This starts to develop around the kindergarten years. One of the reasons why block play is so essential as a part of kindergarten learning. Children begin to build with anticipation, using multiple 3D shapes, including arches, corners, enclosures, crosses, windows. Children's structures include deliberate efforts to achieve symmetry and balance, and prominent, often decorative patterns. They sort and they match shapes and sizes and find equivalences. And it's really important to point out that blocks don't have to simply be our squares and our typical blocks. They can be things like Lincoln logs and many, many other blocks that we're going to talk about, some different types of blocks that learners may encounter in just a bit. The 6th stage of block play is units of units. And this happens a little bit later, ages 6 to 8. It's important that our learners don't just stop playing with blocks. It's often at this time that some of our learners have moved on to Legos or brick-style blocks, where we can certainly get into lots of sophisticated block play, but our typical wooden blocks and other larger block units are still important for our learners to be able to play with during this time. Children repeat simple structures as units, such as multiple arches with ramps or stairs. They begin to build complex structures, towers, buildings with multiple levels and ceiling. And they pay particular attention to details, including patterns, colors, and the functions of structures. Let's talk a little bit about what types of construction materials to provide our learners. We want to make sure we've got lots of our typical unit blocks. Those are those wooden blocks that might be brown or might come in lots of different colors with the traditional 3-dimensional shapes that we're used to. We also need to include interlocking plastic blocks. Those are our Legos and Duplos, etc. Magnetic tiles, pattern blocks, blocks of varied materials, those large cardboard blocks, blocks of foam, Unifix cubes, and non-traditional materials. And let's take a look at what some of these might look like. Look for rocks and other found materials from nature and from your classroom to add to building. These can be a part of building with blocks, or the stones or other materials can act as the building materials themselves. Utilize recycled or repurposed materials, such as cereal boxes, paper towel tubes, Tupperware containers. Here, I repurposed the Tupperware containers that previously I had sorted with to make an exciting creation. Spatial awareness and understanding of shapes are big ideas that influence block play. One big idea is that relationships between objects and places can be represented with mathematical precision. This includes using prepositions as mathematical terms. Take a look at this image of these children playing with blocks and think about the ways that they might use the terms in, on, under, beside, behind, and in front throughout their block play, and how the precision of these terms can influence how they're learning about the location of objects from a mathematical perspective. Another big idea is that spatial relationships can be visualized and manipulated mentally. Let's take a look at this video of children playing with blocks and how spatial relationships comes into play.
As a kindergarten teacher, the mathematical ideas that I see, the most salient thing that I see is that kids are working on problem solving. So the Common Core Standards talks a lot about these mathematical practices like making sense of a problem and persevering to find a solution. That's mirrored in the blocks because figuring out how to build something is a problem and kids have to make sense of that problem and come up with a plan to build it. And then they have to try out their plan, and very often if it doesn't work, they need to make adjustments and persevere to get to their end goal, which is the structure. And they can ask questions like, what size block do I need? What shape should the block be? What can I use if that shape is not available? That last question actually lets them test out this idea of equivalence. With unit blocks in particular, they are all related. So if they need a really long block, which is like a quadruple unit, and it's not available, they will eventually figure out that they can use 2 double units to meet the same goal. When they try out their solutions, they're noticing and comparing the attributes of blocks, which is a big standard in kindergarten according to the Common Core. And then students go from building bridges to making enclosures, and then the task becomes trying to figure out which blocks fit together to be successful at making that enclosure. And again, they have to look at the attributes of blocks, and they need to figure out which shapes fit together and which shapes don't to accomplish their goal. When my students are cleaning up blocks, I see them looking at the shapes and comparing the shapes to the shapes that are on the shelf and trying to figure out where they go. I see them stacking the shapes, and I see them putting shapes together, putting 2 triangles together to make a square. And that's because the way that I have the shelf set up, it encourages that. They might notice that 2 triangles make a square while they're cleaning up, and then later on, when there are no more square blocks available, I've seen them use that as a substitute. And this is one of the reasons why block play has to continue beyond preschool into kindergarten, and I would say even 1st and 2nd grade, because kids need to go through an exploratory process to get to know the blocks, just like we would with any other tool that we use for math. And once they have that familiarity, then they can actually start to think strategically about how to use them.
While playing with actual blocks in a 3-dimensional space is ideal for most of our learners engaged in block play to develop spatial awareness and other block skills, we know that we have some learners who playing with physical blocks is not possible, or perhaps not preferable. And so there are a few limited options for block play virtually. Let's take a look at the first one, Kids Block App. I know, it's a crazy name, Kids Block App. It's an iOS app by Nobuhiro Satake. You can find it on Apple. It is not, unfortunately, available on Google Play or for Android. The Kids Block app gives learners the opportunity to interact with typical block shapes in a virtual space. Learners can change the shape of the blocks and add and move those blocks around. The blocks do act the way that they would in space, tumbling and falling. And give learners the opportunity to manipulate the direction that they're in and see how they would react. So while it's not exactly the same experience as typical block play on the floor, it is an opportunity for our learners with physical disabilities or for those who have a strong preference for digital interactive play to have those block experiences of being able to build, construct, bridge, etc. Another big idea is that the flat faces of solid shapes are 2-dimensional shapes. One way that we can support learners' understanding of this is by deconstructing solids. Deconstructing boxes to bring awareness to the 2-dimensional shapes that make up the 3-dimensional shape. So this is a deconstructed Kleenex box, for example. Provide opportunities for learners to reconstruct shapes or come up with their own. Magnetic tile blocks are ideal for this. Learners can unhook the magnetic sides, see the sides folded out as flat, and then put them together and let them click. These are great, especially for some of our learners with some more significant fine motor needs, who may be able to hold and manipulate the blocks, but don't have the precision to put them together otherwise. You can get more complex with this, taking it from simple prism shapes like we see here, 2, being able to construct an object based on an image, seeing those two-dimensional sides and realizing it as a three-dimensional image. Another big idea that's critically important is that shapes can be combined and separated or composed and decomposed to make new shapes. We saw examples of the teacher referencing this with unit blocks in the video that we watched previously, but it's the idea that different configurations can fill the same space. So 8 of these smaller blocks are the same as 1 of these larger ones, or 4, or 2, depending on the size. We can also examine the fact that different shapes combine to make new shapes. So let's take a look at this with our Math Learning Center app pattern blocks. With the pattern blocks, I can explore the fact that a triangle and another triangle that's rotated can be put together to form a square. I can pull that square out so that I can have that for comparison and see that those two shapes together are going to give me the same as this one shape here. Similarly, I can take my green equilateral triangle. I can take another one. I can rotate that and put those together. Take one more and put those together and see that it's going to make the same shape as my red trapezoid. And that my red trapezoid together with that, when I rotate that and put it together with my equilateral triangles, is going to give me the same shape as this hexagon. Important concepts for learners to be able to play and experiment with. It can be by constructing it like this, or it can even be by layering those same images, those same shapes on top so that they can get a sense of how that might work. Having some experimentation to see, well, will it work with this triangle as well, or does it have to be with my equilateral triangles? Let's take a look at a block play checklist that can help you ensure that your classroom setting has everything that your learners need to get the most out of block play. There should be a designated place for block play with room for play at varied heights to accommodate learners who need to be in varied positions, whether it's on the floor or in a wheelchair. A variety of blocks should be available and should be easily accessible to learners. Blocks with modifications should be available, and we'll look at a few options for that in just a minute. There should be enough blocks for multiple learners to play collaboratively. Make sure that there are additional items from nature and that there are recycled items available, that there are props to encourage representational play, and that there are opportunities to capture the results of block play in photos for reflection and for sharing with families. Creations can fall and find ways to try again. That should be encouraged. We also want to make sure that there are opportunities for communication in the block center. So whether a learner has a robust device or whether you are providing opportunities with core boards and fringe boards to support communication, we can ensure that learners with all sorts of communication abilities have the opportunity to use important core words like go, stop, yes I can, make it big, make it go, and much, much more. There's a link in the handouts to this block checklist that you can post in your block corner to help learners and adults know what type of words that they could be working on in the context of block play. And you can build communication right into the block play with signs on sticks that say stop and go, and even by putting communication symbol images on your blocks for creating messages with those blocks. Let's talk about some other adaptations that we can make to make block play easier for students with fine motor needs and gross motor needs. VELCRO on blocks is one simple way that allows students who have less precise fine motor control to still put blocks together without getting frustrated as their blocks continually fall over. These happen to be commercially purchased ones that are available on Amazon, but you can simply get little VELCRO stickers and adhere them to your blocks on all sides so that learners can stack those blocks together more successfully. Another option is to take wooden blocks, or as we're going to look at, some foam blocks as well, use them in a sensory tub, and you add a little bit of shaving cream. The physics of the shaving cream with a little bit of water clinging to those blocks will help those blocks adhere and be less likely to topple over. It also creates a contained space for learners that may have a little bit of challenges with maneuvering around those blocks. I always like to make learning life-sized, and so I really advocate for finding, these are large foam blocks, for example, and these are actually large domino blocks, but again, another way to play with blocks so that they can be accessible to all learners. I'll tell a little quick story while we're looking at these cute images of a teacher that I once worked with who was very hesitant to use blocks in her classroom because she had some learners who were very active and would run around and throw blocks. And then she had some learners who were very non-ambulatory and couldn't defend themselves if a block came flying their way, wouldn't have the ability to raise their arms to protect themselves or move themselves out of the way. So we found a way around that because she had put away all the blocks because she was worried about it. And so we found a way around it by introducing foam blocks into that classroom where those learners that were perhaps a little bit raucous with their blocks were able to still play safely, and the learners who had more significant motor needs could still be a part of that block play and have those items available to them. Of course, literacy is a part of all of the work that we do with learners, and so I have a couple of recommendations for books that you might enjoy to incorporate into your block play and into your instruction. There's a wonderful illustrated book called Block City that is based on the poem by Robert Louis Stevenson, beautifully illustrated. And then there's a few different books on EPIC, both building with blocks and cool construction and building blocks. And so let's go ahead and take a look. Cool construction and building blocks is a great way to expose learners to different ideas of what they might do with blocks. Thinking about constructing with cards, Tinker Toys, cardboard blocks. These might be just great reminders for our educators as well, and parents too. Talks a little bit about the history of making blocks and different ideas and ways that you can play with blocks. So let's end session 2. Our poem, Block City by Robert Louis Stevenson. What are you able to build with your blocks? Castles and palaces, temples and docks. Rain may keep raining and others go roam, but I can be happy and building at home.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.